Episode 6 of Space Prison by Tom Godwin. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Space Prison, Episode 6, Part 2. It was early morning as Bill Humboldt sat by the fire in his cave and studied the map Craig had made of the plateau's mountain. Craig had left the mountain nameless, and he dipped his pen in ink to write Craig Mountains. "Bill." Delmont Anders entered very quietly, what he had to tell already evident on his face. "He died last night, Bill." It was something he had been expecting to come at any time, but the lack of surprise did not diminish the sense of loss. Lake had been the last of the old ones, the last of those who had worked and fought and shortened the years of their lives that the young ones might have a chance to live. Now he was gone. Now a brief era was ended, a valiant, bloody chapter written and finished. And he was the new leader, who would decree how the next chapter would be written, only 4 years older than the boy who was looking at him with an unconscious appeal for reassurance on his face. "You'd better tell Jim," he said. "Then, a little later, I want to talk to everyone about the things we'll start doing as soon as spring comes." "You mean the hunting?" Delmont asked. "No, more than just the hunting." He sat for a while after Delmont left, looking back down the years that had preceded that day, back to that first morning on Ragnarok. He had set a goal for himself that morning, when he left his toy bear in the dust behind him and walked beside Julia into the new and perilous way of life. He had promised himself that some day he would watch the Gurns die and beg for mercy as they died, and he would give them the same mercy they had given his mother. As he grew older, he realized that his hatred alone was a futile thing. There would have to be a way of leaving Ragnarok, and there would have to be weapons with which to fight the Gurns. These would be things impossible and beyond his reach, unless he had the help of all the others in united, coordinated effort. To make certain of that united effort, he would have to be their leader. So, for 11 years he had studied and trained, until there was no one who could use a bow or spear quite as well as he could, no one who could travel as far in a day or spot a unicorn ambush as quickly. And there was no one, with the exception of George Ord, who had studied as many textbooks as he had. He had reached his first goal. He was leader. For all of them there existed the second goal, the hope of someday leaving Ragnarok and taking Athena from the Gurns. For many of them, perhaps, it was only wishful dreaming, but for him it was the prime driving force of his life. There was so much for them to do, and their lives were so short in which to do it. For so long as he was leader, they would not waste a day in idle wishing. When the others were gathered to hear what he had to say, he spoke to them. "We're going to continue where the old ones had to leave off. We're better adapted than they were, and we're going to find metals to make a ship if there are any to be found. Somewhere on Ragnarok, on the northwest side of a range similar to the Craig Mountains on the plateau, is a deep valley that the Dunbar expedition called the Chasm. They didn't investigate it closely, since their instruments showed no metals there, but they saw strata in one place that was red, an iron discoloration. Maybe we can find a vein there that was too small for them to have paid any attention to. So we'll go over the Craigs as soon as the snow melts from them." "That will be in early summer," George Ord said, his black eyes thoughtful. "Whoever goes will have to time their return for either just before the prowlers and unicorns come back from the north, or wait until they've all migrated down off the plateau." It was something Humboldt had been thinking about and wishing they could remedy. Men could elude unicorn attacks wherever there were trees large enough to offer safety, and even prowler attacks could be warded off wherever there were trees for refuge. spears holding back the prowlers who would climb the trees while arrows picked off the ones on the ground. But there were no trees on the plateau, and to be caught by a band of prowlers or unicorns, there was certain death for any small party of 2 or 3. For that reason, no small parties had ever gone up on the plateau except when the unicorns and prowlers were gone, or nearly so. It was an inconvenience, and it would continue for as long as their weapons were the slow-to-reload bows. "You're supposed to be our combination inventor-craftsman," he said to George. "No one else can compare with you in that respect. Besides, you're not exactly enthusiastic about such hard work as mountain climbing. So from now on, you'll do the kind of work you're best suited for. Your first job is to make us a better bow. Make it a crossbow, with a sliding action to draw and cock the string, and with a magazine of arrows mounted on top of it." George studied the idea thoughtfully. "The general principle is simple," he said. "I'll see what I can do." "How many of us will go over the Craig Mountains, Bill?" Dan Barber asked. "You and I," Humboldt answered. "A 3-man party under Bob Craig will go into the western hills, and another party under Johnny Stevens will go into the eastern hills." He looked toward the adjoining cave where the guns had been stored for so long, coated with unicorn tallow to protect them from rust. "We could make gunpowder if we could find a deposit of saltpeter. We already know where there's a little sulfur. The guns would have to be converted to flintlocks, though, since we don't have what we need for cartridge priming material. Worse, we'd have to use ceramic bullets. They would be inefficient, too light, and destructive to the bores. But we would need powder for mining if we ever found any iron. And if we can't have metal bullets to shoot the gurns, we can have bombs to blast them with." "Suppose," Johnny Stevens said, "that we never do find the metals to make a ship. How will we ever leave Ragnarok if that happens?" "There's another way, a possible way, of leaving here without a ship of our own. If there are no metals, we'll have to try it." "Why wait?" Bob Craig demanded. "Why not try it now?" "Because the odds would be about 10,000 to 1 in favor of the Gurns. But we'll try it if everything else fails." George made, altered, and rejected 4 different types of crossbows before he perfected a reloading bow that met his critical approval. He brought it to where Humboldt stood outside the caves early one spring day when the grass was sending up the first green shoots on the southern hillsides and the long winter was finally dying. "Here it is," he said, handing Humboldt the bow. "Try it." He took it, noting the fine balance of it. Projecting down from the center of the bow, at right angles to it, was a stock shaped to fit the grip of the left hand. Under the crossbar was a sliding stock for the right hand, shaped like the butt of a pistol and fitted with a trigger. Mounted slightly above and to one side of the crossbar was a magazine containing 10 short arrows. The pistol grip was in position near the forestock. He pulled it back the length of the crossbar, and it brought the string with it, stretching it taut. There was a click as the trigger mechanism locked the bowstring in place, and at the same time a concealed spring arrangement shoved an arrow into place against the string. He took quick aim at a distant tree and pressed the trigger. There was a twang as the arrow was ejected. He jerked the sliding pistol grip forward and back to reload, pressing the trigger an instant later. Another arrow went its way. By the time he had fired the 10th arrow in the magazine, he was shooting at the rate of 1 arrow per second. On the trunk of the distant tree, like a bristle of stiff whiskers, the 10 arrows were driven deep into the wood in an area no larger than the chest of a prowler or a head of a unicorn. "This is better than I hoped for," he said to George. "1 man with one of these could equal 6 men with ordinary bows." "I'm going to add another feature," George said. "Bundles of arrows, 10 to the bundle in special holders to carry in the quivers. To reload the magazine, you just slap down a new bundle of arrows, in no more time than it would take to put